Fenomeno would like to find himself at the global finals at BlizzCon.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
That's what he just said in the piece.
Well, then I think we've got some good news for him, Admirable.
What's that?
He's already done it.
That's right. He won.
He can go home.
He won Season 1. He's headed to the global finals. We had PNC from the Americas and Surrender from Asia Pacific, who was able to win their regions as well, which will find themselves at the global finals. And that's part of the reason why we're here, is to find out who the other 3 players are going to be going to that. We have 6 coming from these 3 regions, as well as they'll be joining 2 from China to compete at that event. And we talked about the new format change, the new set, but we also have relegations at stake this season too. And that's something that has to come up when we're talking about Pavel right now, because again, last place in Europe region last year.
Yeah, and by stark contrast as well, you heard Pavel there just signing off with, I want to show that there is no player in Hearthstone who's better than me. And we talk about how Fino achieved the goals that he stated in those interviews already in Season 1. Pavel kind of did not. That's still a question that's left on the table. So I think maybe lofty goals to prove that he's still one of the best players in the world. He's got a fight on his hands just to improve on last season and not be facing relegation as we get towards the last 3 to 4 matches of the season.
All right, well, we can start talking about the deck lists here, because that is something that I've wanted to talk a bit about is with Pavel. Last season, we very much hammered on some of the decks that he had chosen to bring. And in the early weeks, I think rightfully so. In the early weeks, I think it was clear the effort was not put in, as he brought Chef Nomi Priest in week number 1. And, that was, given the meta call, one of the most abysmal choices I think you could have made.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think Pavel himself acknowledged that eventually as well, because there was a kind of tongue-in-cheek tweet that he made at the end of the season as well. It's like, oh, what a coincidence. Both players who went 4 and 10 brought Chef Nomi Priest this season. It was him and Tice. They were both the 2 players that brought Nomi Priest. So I think he knew it as well, that some of his deck choices just went up there.
Yeah, but I do want to give him still a little bit more flack as we head into this one. I've gotten word that both players are going to start on Warrior, but I would like to go over the bans and the protection when that information comes to light. So with both players starting on Warrior, I guess we can start with those deck lists. Here's where I don't have a problem with Pavel's list. I actually think he's brought one of the strongest ones this week. I could go semantics on some of the little things, but he's brought Bomb Warrior this week. He's got a Spellbreaker in the list, which I think is a strong choice right now, given that Priest is such a strong deck in the metagame. You need a way to shut something down, and it's flexible versus some of the other decks that players can bring. So for instance, if somebody brings Mech Hunter or what have you, just any big minions you need to silence. I feel like silence is a powerful effect. I like that he's got Militia Commander in addition to Relentless Mummy, because right now I think Militia Commander is still just a very strong card that stacks up.
Agreed. Yeah, just looking at those tech cards like that, I think it's very interesting. Just the way that you build a lineup in this Shield Conquest is very different. As we can just quickly see, the bans there, Mage on one side, Rogue banned away from Pavel. Both players protected Warrior, and then both players picked Warrior first match. But that protect mechanic is kind of what I want to talk about and how it changes things, because normally, say you were building this Bomb Warrior deck, right, and Priest was a prevalent force in the metagame, you could say, I don't need a Spellbreaker in my deck, I'm just going to ban Priest, and then I don't have to deal with it. When you're building a lineup for the Shield version of Conquest, any player you play against could protect their Priest, which means you have to have decks prepared for any eventuality or make a really, really hard call on what decks your opponent is going to protect. There's no way you can just completely eliminate a class from the format and then build your decks with text with that in mind.
Yeah, which is something that I find very different about this Conquest and the Conquest that we saw in playoffs just a couple years back. Apologize for the spectator issue. We'll get this solved as quickly as we can. I started off on Pavel talking about Bomb Warrior, and that's exactly what Fenos brought to the table. And Fenos is definitely built quite differently, I think, than Pavel's is, where you're seeing Clockwork Goblins, Reg Caliber, and Augmented Elec, but he's got a lot of the package that we see in some of the Control Warrior decks at the top end as well, with the Armegadillo and the 2 copies of Tomb Warden that are added into the list. And I find that quite interesting, because that's something that I do love about Warrior right now, is that Frightened Flunky style package, where it's just the taunt things and then an Armegadillo to buff them. Like something that I think Bomb Warrior has historically struggled a bit with is having some top end. They really have relied on bombs to get the job done, and then a removal package in order to find those bombs for the opponent at the end of the game.
Right. We are back into the game. You can see Fino's off to a flyer here, Eternium Rover, and then coins the Elec. Pavel with no answer. He is going to get the real bad news that these bombs are about to double up, and in a couple of turns' time, he's about to get some even worse news, because Fino's got the twins. Pavel has them loaded up as well, but Fino, the player with initiative, is going to be in a much better position to leverage those over the coming turns.
Kind of surprised Pavel chose to go with no play last turn. Just maybe try to absorb some damage. I'll be curious to see how this game plan works out. Something that's certainly on his mind is Dynamatic lining up into an Augmented Elic. That's a play you very much are interested in. But you're going to have to get bored somehow, so it looks like he's going with Eternium Rover and attach the Snip Snap. It's usually good enough to fend off a lot of warrior stuff.
Yep, super tricky to deal with. Fino just might end up kind of on an ignore plan here, just based on his hand. If he gets a rush minion off the top, he does, but that wasn't one of the rush minions I was kind of referring to. Perhaps more interested in Restless Mummy in this scenario.
You'd be more interested in the card that actually clears off the Eternium?
I would, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing out how ridiculously redundant that statement was. That's not even sarcasm. I enjoy it, please.
Well, I can tell you Fino didn't enjoy that turn. He was hunting for something that really filled in the curve. You know, even just like a Frightened Flunky, I think, would have been suitable here.
Yeah, anything. And you see Fino stop for a second there. Obviously, he had no plays to consider, but he did just want to stop and think about what trading into this Eternium Rover looked like. It didn't take him long to decide. Just, hey, ship the damage, consolidate the damage. Got 2 bombs in the deck already. I've got a lot of powerful plays coming up once I get to turn 7.
Yeah, but I think that's a big mark on the game right there, is that, you know, Pavel has traded some of the early health for a mid-game advantage.
Yep.
You know, he could have very easily played the Eternium Rover. The turn he just armored up. He could have very easily played a Snip Snap and just tried to absorb some attacks. He traded health to have a mid-game position. And so now you look down at the board, and is Fino getting this back for a while?
It's a great question, yeah. And I think the way Pavel did it was actually probably correct in the long run, because if he plays the Eternium Rover on the previous turn just to soak some damage, okay, sure, the Eternium Rover is just one attack, gets dealt with, gets value traded, and then it passes back to Pavel the next turn. He plays his Snip Snap, and then because his Snip Snap is only a 2/3, it's then a much more attractive prospect for Fino to just be able to trade into and keep board.
Yeah.
By putting the 2 together, he made a target in this 3/6 that was just so awkward for Fino to clear that Fino just had to leave it up, and because Fino had to leave it up, Pavel's been able to swing the board back.
And kind of interesting that he attacks the Eternium Rover here over the Clockwork Goblin.
Unity, precision.
He wanted to shut off the armor gain instead. Just, I guess something that's on your mind is if Ziliax is going to get played, Fino wants to be interested in trading.
Yep.
Because it's such an efficient trade, and what that means is your opponent's not getting armor as you attack these 1/1s into the magnetic minion. That's really smart.
Yeah, essentially, if Ziliax came down, it was going to come down on either minion, and either way, it was going to have 5 health, which means that you trade back through it in the same way. So a minion like Eternium Rover that gains armor as those attacks go in is just generally going to be a net positive for Fino when you have to trade back through it. Both players' hands kind of just stalled out a little bit here.
So many choices.
Yeah, I mean, this is the turn for Warrior where I feel like they probably end up struggling the most, is like a turn 6 position. You don't really have anything that fills in the turn. And so I look at a spot like this, you know, that's one of the reasons that I mentioned decklist stuff, is I like the way that Pavel's deck is built, but he does not have our Armageddillo in the list.
Right.
And that's where the turn 6 sits. Like for Fino here, if he drew Armageddillo, or now he's picked up Snip Snap, so that's wonderful.
Hey.
Just anything to fill in your turn 6 in a strong manner is what's important. You know, both players have Blastmaster Boom, both players have Dr. Boom. Pavel's yet to actually get any bombs in Fino's deck.
Yep.
So we're in a pretty, you know, face-up battle at this point. Both players on relatively even footing.
And it's yet another upside of Flight and Flunky coming into various Warrior decks now, is that, yeah, sure, you can jam it and you pick up another Armageddillo, you pick up another Tomb Warden, whatever it is. You can also just pick a minion that costs 5 or 6, right? Just a generic taunt minion just to fill out that curve in situations where that's what you're looking for.
I've taken that, what's it, Violet Warden?
Yes.
4/7 taunt?
Yep.
I've taken that thing a lot of times. It's just Archmage with taunt. Just obsoleted the old Archmage.
How do you feel about the split snap as opposed to the stack snap?
The reason I would like it here is simply due to the Warpath timing. If Pavel's going to Warpath, what that means is he's not playing one of the big 7s. Good news for Fino. Number 2 is he can't quad path. So the Snip Snaps are safe in a position like this. And since he's going to be battling for board, it looks like the Dr. Boom Mad Genius is slated for Fino. The 2 Snip Snaps separate gives him more tradability.
Mad Genius comes down. Pavel gives a little smile. He's very happy with his turn 7 Dr. Boom Mad Genius. Fino gave a wry smile on the other side.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much thought here for Feno. Blastmaster Boom is 4 boom bots right now.
Yep.
But the problem is your snip snaps don't go off efficiently in that manner. You could have Warpath on your mind. I think it's possible. If that's the case, though, I don't know. Maybe this could have been better planned out if that was the case.
It's one of the reasons I was wondering about stacking Snip Snap on the previous turn, just for some board space concerns. Obviously, it still spawns the same number of microbots afterwards. But you do still have just like one big chunky minion that's harder for your opponent to split and put a bunch of 1/1s onto the board, whereas a couple of 2/3s, something to think about.
I'm going to go through it
Also,
fairly...
just think about it, if he plays Blastmaster Boom here, yes, Pavel would take a lot of damage in this process, but the Omega Devastator into the Blastmaster Boom and then the 4-path would then end up being a full clear as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to go through one iteration real quick that's a little bit deeper. So flash back to Feno's turn 6 with the separate snip snaps.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of context that can change in that manner. But something to note is that Pavel doesn't run 2 Morden in his deck.
Sure.
And so I think that's where Feno's thinking was, is in the iteration where Pavel plays a Boom Mad Genius, and then I play a Boom Mad Genius, 2 Morden isn't going to be able to separate these and have valuable attacks against it. It just doesn't exist. I think that's one of the reasons he ended up separating these, but if you go a little bit deeper and think about that back-to-back Dr. Boom Mad Genius turns, what ends up happening is Pavel's just going to Warpath in that instance when you play your Blastmaster Boom. So Feno is favoring the damage in this spot. He said the damage was better than having the snip snaps stacked up and being able to deal repetitive damage. That's interesting to me, because the Warpath also yields Feno initiative on this turn right here.
It does, yeah. The Warpath is certainly not a bad outcome for Feno. I think, you know, you can definitely fear just having your board cleared in that scenario way too much. Like, Warpath was used. It's a reasonable card for Warrior. Pavel took a bunch of damage in the process, and Omega Devastator died on Pavel's side of the board, and you got full tempo to just play your 8-mana card on an empty board. It's really not a bad scenario for Feno to be in.
Maybe he also just wanted some practice of what Dr. Boom Mad Genius feels like when it costs 9.
He's just going to play Mad Genius and then skip the hero power.
If he does that next turn, that is legendary.
He doesn't want to get shade thrown at him like Hunter Ace did yesterday for just winning with the broken cards.
Well, to be fair, it was you who threw the shade at him.
Well, I know.
Okay, so they're fearing you.
Sure.
Skip the hero power! Don't play anything!
This is scary.
You're just playing proxy Dr. Boom Mad Genius just to swag on people. Like,
you just break out a Sharpie and write a 9 on it. Prep for next week. For those of you not in the know, there is a balance patch that's incoming next week. You can check out all the news and update that you want. You can follow Play Hearthstone on Twitter, as well as HS Esports on Twitter, and you can always check out the deck list and the Grandmaster schedule across all regions at playhearthstone.com/esports.
Bomb goes off with Pavel, 1 remaining in the deck, leaving him at a effective 11 health right now.
It's another thought for playing the Blastmaster Boom earlier for Feno in this game. Don't want your opponent to
Oh yeah,
bombs.
I mean, yeah, very basic level. The sooner you play it, the less likely they are to draw those bombs and reduce your amount of boom bots.
I like more boom bots.
Really? I like less. No, wait, that's dumb. I don't. You were definitely right.
Yeah!
But this is kind of the pain of the Warrior Mirror. It's like, you know, Feno has done a lot of great work in terms of consolidating early damage. Has another bomb in the deck, so he just needs to kind of push 11 more damage and just try and force over the line. But when you're up against Mad Genius, it's sticking a minion to actually be able to connect with your opponent's face is just a nigh-on impossibility.
That's kind of what I find charming about this game.
Like, Wrench Caliber is the card that can really change the equation, right? Like, that's the one that they will struggle to stop you dealing damage with. All these minions, they don't get to hit face all too often.
Pavel yet to find any bomb insertions into Feno's deck, so that Blastmaster Boom is reserved in hand for quite some time. Something that, with Bomb Warrior, that's troubled me a bit in my time playing it is that its average draw in the later stages tends to be a bit weaker.
This would be a good
And so
time
that's
for
one
a
of
master
the things I really like about Feno's deck, is when you have our Megadillo and you have the 2 Mordens in there, as well as the Frightened Flunky, your average draw picks up quite a bit.
Admirable himself making an appearance there over on the far right. This is some hot garbage, though. Sorry, that's deeply insulting. I just said one of these cards is admirable, and all of these cards are hot garbage.
That's fine.
That's very unkind. I apologize.
Just be aware of that.
Yeah.
Just remember. I'll remember this.
Yeah.
I never forget, and I never forget. Just like Zulch. Pavel down to 11.
Yep. Down to 0 bombs in the deck now, though.
Ziliak's found.
Scrap Hound as well, but I lean towards the Ziliax, of course. Extremely premium card in the Bomb Warrior mirror.
Looking like an Omega Assembly to start. If you find a vicious Scrap Hound, perhaps a Ziliak's turn. If you don't, you have a nice Dynamatic lined up. Perhaps even better. Haven't really looked too deeply at it. Whoa, 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 whoa! Pavel! Pavel!
Not a mech! Not a mech! Not a mech, Pavel!
Feno, yeah, I think rightfully so, gives the confused look.
Not off to the greatest of starts.
True story. I'm going to flash back to yesterday with Orange and the Ziliax.
Yeah.
It's just brain lapse.
It is.
It's not like a decision he's making to try and risk that Restless Mummy staying alive. Just brain lapsed on it. You're so used to all your minions being mechs, you messed up.
But I think also you have more of an allowance to make that kind of mistake in terms of perception when you have a really, really strong season like Orange did last season, where he was in contention for first place in his division right up until the end, than Pavel, who underperformed, you know?
True story. Not excusing those mistakes, I'm just trying to explain them.
Yep. I mean, I get it. You played a minion. It had rush. It must be a mech.
Yeah.
Like, that just makes sense.
Duh. That was a costly one, though.
It was.
Magic neutralized.
Second Omega Devastator for Feno. Always feels good to find
There it is.
the kaboom when your opponent's flipping over the 3/1/1s on the next turn. I'm like, yes, all of those do need to trade.
Clockwork Automaton could end up being pretty clutch here. That's another source of direct damage that Pavel can't really prevent.
Wait for laser, 6 ya.
Yep.
It's like a,
Okay, then.
it's like a bootleg Firelands portal.
I again want to state for the record that I have not said that word once so far this season, and you've said it like 9 times.
I think I have sufficiently heisted it from you.
Okay. I'm glad I can provide you with new bits as our partnership blossoms and evolves.
All right, so now Pavel's got some stuff to work with. He can finally start shuffling some bombs, but his life total is dwindling. And so that's got to be priority number 1 for him, I think.
Yes. Another piece of crucial context I actually don't think we covered so far is that there is no Elysiana in either of these decks, which is, you know, a card more commonly used in Control Warrior, but we've seen it in Bomb Warrior builds as well, and it's actually a very crucial card in the Bomb Warrior mirror. You know, if one person has an Elysiana and the other doesn't, you can see a huge advantage, not really because of a fatigue scenario, but because of an eliminating a deck full of bombs kind of scenario.
Yeah.
That's not an availability on either side here. So when they do start getting down to the lower reaches of their deck, the potential burst damage of just a bunch of bombs being shuffled in there is massive.
Kind of curious about this turn from Pavel. You know, my head was leaning towards Restless Mummy, Augmented Elec, and Clockwork Goblin on this turn. He used the Restless Mummies to clear off, and then you shuffle in some bombs to get ready for that Blastmaster Boom. I want to touch on the Elysiana a little bit with the dynamic it changes actually in the face-up play. When it's on ladder or a hidden deck list, that Elysiana becomes a surprise factor. Your opponent is often playing for tempo with bomb cards, and a lot of times that ends up going to waste because you get to Archivist Elysiana and override the bombs. In an open deck list scenario like we have here in Grandmasters, what it does is it drastically changes the way that the players will actually play the game. Like, they will hold on to bomb cards for the right moment to try to pressure them through an Elysiana. And it often will slow players down due to that factor. They're trying to make sure they can neutralize the counterplay at every measure. And so you can see what I was talking about with last turn. Pavel wouldn't have used that Ziliax, so that would be something that's still on your mind, is the amount of damage you could take. But I think his board position would be better secured in this spot.
It's interesting as well to see Fino just commit the Clockwork Automaton to the board. You have Spark Drill, which is a much weaker play on the board, or the option of Floating Mana, which never really feels particularly good. But it's kind of that scenario I talked about before, right? Where a minion on the board just doesn't really count for a great deal when you're facing down Dr. Boom Mad Genius on the other side. Like, it makes them act, it makes them do things, but they can. Like, if you want that automaton to be damage, it's better in your hand just waiting for a hero power to double than it is as a 4-4 on the board.
Yeah, I would have liked to see the Spark Drill as well. It's just also mana efficiency. Like, that extra pip of mana means a lot somewhere later in the game.
10-10.
Go.
Get him. 10-10. Dead.
Yeah, I mean, Pavel had multiple ways to handle this. One is, you know, in likelihood, and I'm sorry, one of them is direct and one of them is in unlikelihood. The Blastmaster Boom could technically answer a Mecha'thun, but he did have Militia Commander and the Restless Mummy on this turn as well. But that's an ideal answer you end up finding off the hero power. Fino visibly not happy with that result.
Yep.
And now Pavel, I think, has perhaps taken a pretty firm advantage here. Still has Blastmaster Boom and looks like he might get the full Monty with it.
You might, yeah. Although, you were mentioning Blastmaster Boom, isn't that now the first bomb that's gone into Fino's deck? Off
That's
that
the second one.
That's the second one?
The Clockwork Goblin with the Ziliax.
Ah, that's right, yeah.
Just a moment ago.
Yep.
Fino offered a Clockwork Goblin as well. That card's in your deck. A la the rule of thumb versus Warrior on the Snip Snap count is stack 2, separate 1. The rule of thumb on Discoveries is if the card's in your deck, it's probably worth taking.
Yeah. Nothing remaining for Fino, I believe. No, nothing comes out. Just a 1-mana 1/2. Same deal for Pavel, I think. Saw that one Restless Mummy involved in his little faux pas earlier.
I'm feeling Augmented Elec. Swing the wrench.
Yeah, sign me up.
This would be a good time for a master plan.
So Pavel looks to be more interested in the additional Boombot. I personally am not interested in the additional Boombot because I think that your hero power of 3/1/1s is super valuable. And I think that the Augmented Elec shuffling additional bomb is worth more than a Boombot is.
I can definitely see that argument.
Now, if that Boombot's going to deal 4, we're on even footing. 3, though. Pff, give me the bomb.
I love that fuse thing.
Important to note that Pavel still has Clockwork Goblin and a Wrench Caliber left, so it's possible the Augmented Elec can just get more later on as well.
Yes.
Not certain he's afforded that liberty.
But I believe he still has a second copy of Augmented Elec as well that he could use for that purpose later on.
Oh, like actually doubling him up.
Well, this is going to hurt Fino.
Ow. Okay. All right, 2 ouchies and 2 non-ouchies.
Yep. Actually took less damage than the average there. Took 9. Average would have been 10. It's always deceptive when a 4 comes out. You always feel like you got unlucky when you get hit for 4, but actually, Fino rolled low there.
Okay,
In a good way,
then.
Yeah, he rolled the good kind of low.
Yeah.
He rolled high by rolling low.
It's like a save throw. Yeah. Which I guess you technically want to roll high on. But you get... You get the point.
Oh, I love that
Semantics.
We've lost grip on this analogy. Let's move on.
Yeah, laser face.
Yeah.
Pretty quick payoff available if Pavel wants to take it with the Clockwork Goblin. My guess is, though, that because the bomb cards are buried deep into the deck and they know that they're headed towards that territory, that he does want to save it for the Augmented Elec Clockwork Goblin Wrench Caliber turn. And there's the natural Ziliax now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry, I incorrectly said that Pavel was in the same position where his Town Crier wasn't to draw, thinking that he'd already played Ziliax, but that was a discovered Ziliax earlier in the game.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too, is that one of the reasons that Pavel, I think, felt comfortable playing it this slow is because that was a discovered Ziliax.
This would be a good time for a master plan.
It does mean with the extra draws that he has had that he is thinning his deck down to the size where, you know, not necessarily like fatigue is what you're thinking about, but the thinner your deck is, the more potential you give to your opponent for one of those explosive, you know, shuffle 4 to 6 bombs in one turn and just wait for him to blow up to try and kill you kind of situation.
Yeah. Another benefit of finding that Ziliax too is that you can start to play aggressively now if you want to. When your opponent finds a tempo swing back at you, you know that you have a substantial defense in the face of that with Ziliax.
Right.
That's one of the fears of playing proactively versus the Dr. Boom Mad Genius is you're worried about the tempo being swung so hard back against you.
Yep. It's just an unfortunate byproduct of playing against Dr. Boom Mad Genius that every time you play a minion, you make all of their cards good. And that's just a miserable prospect some of the time. You know, most of the time. I'm willing to scale that one up. You know what?
Yeah.
All of the time.
Oof.
Yeah, I said it.
You're free to say that.
You're free to disagree and be wrong.
Okay,
I didn't say
then.
nothing.
Oh, I love that
Yeah, you killed the Elec.
Yeah, I mean, the way he was doing it, he was always going to kill the Elec and the Clockwork Goblin. He was just trying to decide which attacks went into where for which purpose. Didn't really make an enormous amount of difference because they both had 3 attack anyway. It was just making sure he got his sequencing right, didn't miss anything. Didn't fall victim to any of those little technical mistakes that Pavel made earlier.
No tomb can hold me.
I'm a little interested in the 1/1 expenditure for Fino in the last turn. He threw the spark in there. Like, I know it's a super fringe setup, but the idea of keeping your hand full if you secure the advantage in a tight situation as he draws 2 bombs in a row. 3 bombs in a row! And he does not have a way to generate any amount of armor right now.
Oh! Fortunately, no offensive direct damage hero power over on the other side for Pavel.
Well, I mean, that's turn by turn. Fino needs to find Blast Shield.
Right, but let's take it turn by turn if you're in Fino's shoes. Right now, he's okay. There's no point worrying about the future because he can't beat it unless he finds some way to generate armor, unless he gets a Blast Shield of his own.
Finds Blast Shield. That is enormous.
Dropping the 2 Mordens here just to play around. I believe there's a second Wrench Caliber remaining from Pavel. Just wants the taunts in play so that any direct damage in the form of weapons can't go face. As it happens with Pavel's hand, if there was a Wrench Caliber behind all this, he could have got it through anyway. But Fino does live to fight another day. That Blast Shield gives him that security that he needs. I say security, he's at 8.
It's something.
Yeah. But this is the problem with being so low on health, is that suddenly the option for like greedy plays just goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
You can never say, you know what, I'll take 4 here, I'll take 3 here, whatever it is. No. Every point of health that you have remaining is now so precious to you that you have to use resources aggressively. You have to use removal in suboptimal situations. You essentially just have to panic. Boom, there's a laser. You're down to 5, idiot. That's a bomb.
Precision.
Shudderwock? All the bomb battle cries? First and foremost? Anything else relevant?
Tomb Warden.
Okay.
But it's Tomb Warden says summon a copy of itself. So the Shudderwock will make 6/6 Shudderwocks.
Yes.
They don't have Rush.
No.
This would be a good time for
That
a
is
master
relevant.
plan.
That's attached to that battle cry. You have Frightened Flunky as well. Town Crier, obviously nullified. Omega Devastator.
Azalina Soul Thief hasn't been played, but it's in the deck for Fino. Doesn't work in combination when you already have the Shudderwock, though. There's no way you can play those one after the other, but it
This
would have
would
been
be a
interesting
good
if it was
time
played
for a
already.
master plan.
Blastmaster Boom.
Oh, jeez.
Clockwork Goblin.
Yeah, the bomb cards. First thing that came to mind.
Wow, that is, I mean, that could be a major kicker to the game. And if Fino doesn't die this next turn, I offered the option of Blast Shield too. I mean, certainly you'd be pressing the Blast Shield button.
It would depend on your odds next turn, right? Like, Pavel's deck is getting very small. You have the ability to shuffle, well, at least 2 more bombs into the deck with Shudderwock. Both Clockwork Goblins have been played now.
This had to be why Fino set up the Augmented Elic, was to try to get this payoff, right?
Right.
In the event that Augmented Elic doesn't survive.
Right.
Oh my, Pavel offered with a strange option here. So the Clockwork, he's going to take the percentage of ending the game. Augmented Elic and Clockwork Goblin gives Fino a 2 in 9 draw to lose. The Tomb Warden provided a pretty substantial board presence. Omega Devastator cleared off most of this board and got the ball rolling.
It's interesting that he's taken the Clockwork Goblin and then stopped to think about his turn. I feel like taking the Clockwork Goblin pretty much commits you to your turn already.
I would agree. Perhaps Pavel's rewatching that clip of footage versus Amnesiac in the 2016
Yeah, you could
Championship.
see Fino just wincing. He doesn't want to see it. He's got to dodge, and he does, and he picks up Wrench Caliber alongside it as well.
Massive. So now...
And now, yeah, the Blast Shield becomes super premium with Wrench Caliber and an Augmented Elic still in play.
Restless Mummy to clear off opposing Elic. You could
Push
connect for
damage.
10. And then you have Shudderwock back behind that. So Fino is out of range of 2 bombs right now. He's out of range of the hero power and drawing 2 bombs right now. He's giving us the wave it on.
He's ushering the bombs.
He's waving it in.
Keep them going. There's one. No! No! Fino, we've been through this. You can't dab on camera.
That's it. Fino, I'm officially rooting for Pavel in this match now.
Yep.
3 bombs in a row drawn for Pavel at the end of that one. But that's a return serve. You know, that happened to Fino first.
Yep.
I respect Pavel for going for the percentage on that final turn as well. I think that absolutely was necessary. The only thing that makes me sad about that match isn't that we didn't get to see Shudderwock. It's that Fino dabbed at the end.
I mean, he dabbed last season and then won the whole thing. Like, it's honestly unacceptable. I don't know how the other players in Europe are allowing this to happen, but it can't continue.
Did he break the curse? Is it broken? Is dabbing allowed now?
No, never.
It's tough to tell that to Fino in that spot.
The statistical roll from Pavel is probably the biggest talking point, though, at the end there, because that really did make or break the whole game. Because in order to take that statistical role on getting the bomb draws and killing Feno, he had to leave up the augmented Elec on the other side of the board, which then allowed Feno to maximize his chances of victory by not only shuffling bombs in with the Wrench Caliber, but also hitting Blast Shield. If that situation wasn't available, Feno might have had to then roll the dice on his Shudderwock himself, then shuffling more bombs in, which is interesting. Like, I was talking about that probability outcome, while Pavel then like hit the discover button and found the Clockwork Goblin and hit a probability equation of his own. It's something that we'd need many, many minutes to break down and really like work out what the numbers come down in terms of win rate and all of those plays. But the one thing we can say with certainty is that it was a huge swingy talking point in the game.
Yeah, I think that Blast Shield being rolled up is definitely what changes Pavel's decision in that spot too.
Oh,
like,
for sure. That's a huge incentive.
You're staring at Blast Shield and you're like, I'm not connecting this damage again. My hand's not good enough. I need to just go for it right now. So I respect Pavel in that regard. Some mid-game stuff, I think that the ugly mistake on the Dynamatic is probably one of the most costly momentum points that was there in the game. But we got to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to find out if Pavel can tie up this series. We're in Shield Phase Conquest, which means Feno cannot play his Bomb Warrior in the next games. Stay tuned.
My name is Sam Braithwaite, and I'm the Senior Global Franchise Lead for Hearthstone Esports. This event was especially cool because it takes place right after the brand new expansion, Rise of Shadows. Historically in Hearthstone Esports, we do our big events like this towards the end of an expansion cycle, but we really wanted to shake things up and really showcase that not only is the world champion the person who can pilot the best decks, but also the person who, when presented with a brand new game, can put together the best decks leading into the world championship. Cheers to you guys, the sold-out crowd here for the HCT 2019 World Championship.
Welcome back to 2019 HCT World Championship.
We've had a lot of fun games, and we're looking forward to the grand finals. Showdown. Viper versus Hunter Ace. Only one can be the champion. Oh, come on!
Match we did.
Wacko pick a Vix coming out from Hunter Ace.
It's now or never. Archvillain reform.
Okay! In a completely solved game, Hunter Ace finds a way to maximize his chances. It's been a wonderful journey throughout the past few years of the Hearthstone Championship Tour, where stars were made and dreams came true.
amidst our first match here at the Hearthstone Grandmasters Season 2 for the European region. And that's Admirable, and I'm joined by Sottle. And Sottle, Fenomeno got off to a 1-0 lead in a Bomb Warrior mirror match, and since we are now in Shield Face Conquest as the format, he can no longer play his Bomb Warrior, so he's going to have to move on to something else. Pavel still has that option that's in there, and I got word during the break that he's going to be sticking on that Bomb Warrior, and I think he needs to redeem himself in this game, because he had a mid-game error there that I think potentially cost him a lot of momentum in that last game.
It did, yeah. It was a significant, decrease in the amount of stats he had on the board. It increased Feno's options for just being able to counter-punch back against him. Of course, it's easy to focus on just what happened at the end of the game, but nothing in Hearthstone really happens in isolation. All the paths just lead to an eventual conclusion, and when you make a mistake like that early on that costs you some momentum, that can very much have a big impact on what happens at the end of the game.
Yeah, I suppose my concern with it is that this has been a talking point for Pavel over Season 1 is micro misplays that lead to things in the game shifting in momentum. To see that in Game 1 of Season 2 of Grandmasters, that does not spell good things if that trend continues.
Well, I think crucially, it's been both. Yesterday I really defended that even top players can make these little micro mistakes and little just mechanical interactions that they get wrong, but the very, very best players always have their macro game plans on point, and that's how they're teching their decks, what lineups they're bringing, how they play a matchup on an overarching scale. Pavel's kind of got that wrong as well, because he's played some matchups look weirdly in Season 1. He's brought weird decks. He can't then afford to be making small mechanical mistakes on top of that, because then you're just making mistakes across the board, and that's not good enough at this level. And we know, again, we have to keep saying this, Pavel, at one point, was the best player in the world, undisputed. So we know he has that level. It's just for some reason he's not at it right now.
For some reason he's not. I just got word he's going to be sticking on Bomb Warrior here for game number 2. Feno, meanwhile, has gone over to his combo Priest deck, so we can take a look at this one and show you exactly what's in store. The Divine Spirit Innerfire Priest is in full focus right now as this balance patch is set to move extra arms back to 3 mana due to, in part, the dominance that this deck has been displaying. It was the highest win rate at the Masters Tour in Seoul, and having a turn 1 minion into a turn 2 extra arms is a daunting task to take on if you're the opponent.
It is. When the buffs were first announced, I looked at extra arms and then I sought clarity on whether more arms also got discounted or whether it was then down to 3. They both cost 2. Essentially, extra arms is a Blessing of Kings with like 7 different upsides. You can play it on turn 2 and then turn 3. You can play it on 2 different minions. You can it's so much more flexible with the same effect, costing 4 for +4/+4,
yeah.
Essentially. It's like, this is just one of the best cards in the game now. And then obviously it took a while. It took for this expansion to come in for us to really see that. And it turns out, yes it was. But again, I tweeted about this a couple of days ago. I absolutely put no blame on that card being buffed up to 2 and then them saying, okay, that was a mistake. Like, that's great. Like, do more of that. Take big risks, and if they don't work out, you can just roll it back. Like, that's amazing. Just let us have fun with potentially powerful things.
To me, that's the whole benefit of a digital card game.
Yeah.
You print those cards physically, and they end up being
It happened while we were just going through the worst case scenario. It's just there. Spellbreaker, though, in hand for Pavel.
Yep.
This could be the big kicker. Feno is potentially about to get some bad news. He's going all the way in on this Light Warden, but now he has a decision.
Yes, that draw, I think, saved Feno in this spot, because there is no doubt in my mind he's either using hero power and smash and face to buff up the Light Warden on 2 attack, or he was going to jam that extra arms.
Heal your opponent and attack your opponent afterwards.
Yeah, because Feno does not play around one-ofs very often. Like, he has to have strong evidence in his mind to play around a one-of, and that's true for almost any high-level professional player. If they do not have a strong way to play around something, they just don't.
Here's my counter-argument to that. I very much agree with the philosophy, don't play around one-ofs as a general rule, but it's always a risk-reward table. And the risk here, if a Spellbreaker comes down and hits your double-buffed Light Warden, and it's then a vanilla 1/2 on the board against a 4/3 that you can't deal with, you have probably then lost the board forever for the rest of the game with this hand. You have no way to fight back against that. There you see the nod from Feno. I think his thought process followed very closely along the lines of what we were just describing.
Another injured Tolvir picked up. Injured Tolvir, I think, is really the card that set this deck above the limit. Priest needed a turn 2 play that wasn't extra arms that actually made sense in your deck.
Yep.
Like, They got 2 of them in this set. They had the Nephroset Ritualist, which heals all its adjacent minions on Battlecry, and you got an injured Tolvir, which, if it lives, your hero power just gives it additional health effectively.
Yep. Not to mention the Circle of Healing synergy, which we're going to see come in pretty clutch on 2 consecutive occasions now.
Not to mention the fact that it's a 2-drop that rogues cannot backstab. That's a big deal because Rogue is one of the decks that's, you know, supposed to be strong against a deck like this.
Yep. Not to mention the synergy that it has with revive effects, like Psychopomp in the deck, where it then comes back at full health.
Not to mention...
Such a dumb phrase, not to mention, and then you're just mentioning it anyway. Like, what does that even mean?
Well, it's quite ironic, you see. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Like rain on your wedding day, of course. Famously the most ironic thing that's ever happened.
Ah, yes, but you see... It's made entirely of iron, thus it is ironic.
The great Ed Byrne once said, that's only ironic if you are a weatherman and you predicted that it was going to be sunny on your wedding day.
Pavel's fighting back, though. You know, there's the tools in the combo priest deck are quite... they're very much, in my experience, like a success versus failure rate style of play, and those historically are some of the most powerful decks in card games in general. When a deck has so much good stuff going on that the player agency is there, but it's mostly seated in the idea of when you succeed, extremely powerful, when you fail, try again next time. The idea is just that you succeed more often than you fail, and that's a large part of how this priest deck operates. Right now for Fino, his best draws are Psychopomp, and gosh, right after that, it's probably card draw.
Nausea Cleric, yeah. Nausea Cleric, Acolyte Pain, Wild Pyromancer, just the tools that you need to put a big card draw explosion together. While we were being done, there was actually a really important decision for Fino on the previous turn. He could have value traded over the Spellbreaker and then played a second Tolvir, Circle of Healing again to have this massive board getting full revive. He instead held back a little bit, you know, not necessarily wanting to expose the last minion in hand to the board. What do you make of that? Because he did then kind of concede a lot of board tempo to just Shield Slam, for example.
The exact nod has to be Brawl, right? It's right into turn 5. It's the first opportunity available. Pavel did not have any development really early on. Like, I think Brawl is extremely high likelihood at that point. So you have to find another way to play around it. And so for Fino, I think that meant holding on to the injured Tolvir here and just being able to be able to set up boards and keep chipping away. You know, the chip damage matters a lot because warriors can continue to extend their life total. And what that means is, as your opponent extends their life total, you need to have chipped away at it so that a Divine Spirit combo actually threatens for lethal.
2 dead Tolvirs. There's the boy.
It's 2-1 on Tolvir to Light Warden.
Yep.
Light Warden wouldn't have been a bad pickup in that spot either, I don't think. You know, just the ability for it to grow is important.
Yeah, it was just important that Fino had a thing to play there to at least keep some pressure going against a big 7 play from Pavel. The biggest of the 7 plays did come out.
Yeah, well now I'm fearing
kind of a whiff.
We might just be in the, you know, inner fire chips away territory. With Wild Pyromancer and 3 0-cost spells in hand, anytime you pick up an Acolyte or a Northstar Cleric, you have card draw capacity. So that first inner fire is, in effect, operating as a chip away damage effect. Still another inner fire, still a topsy-turvy in the deck.
Auxiliary effect of the inner fire is that if Rush Minion is used here to trade, which it most likely will be, it doesn't get to just value trade over a 2/6, in which case it's really swinging the board back. Like, Fino can't afford to lose board. This Priest deck can't afford to lose board. Like, if you fall behind on board, it's very, very often game over. Like, at that point, you just have to start throwing out gambits, like jamming your Armet and then just dropping a couple of 1s and 2s on the board to just try. You put like 21, 28 health onto the board, and then your opponent can't deal with something. Yeah.
It's High Priest Armet Psychopomp is your final gambit usually. And Fino doesn't have the card draw yet. That's the only thing that matters right now. This turn is very likely. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. That's not an unwarranted concession,
Yeah.
but that is an early concession.
It certainly would appear early to an onlooker, but I think it's very reasonable in the position that he was in. He drew Neverset Ritualist that turn, which is really just nothing in that scenario.
That's a strong auxiliary draw. You draw a Northshire Cleric there, you're back in the game.
But like from the problem is you draw Nausea Cleric the next turn, so you spend your turn drawing cards and developing a weak board. Pavel's had an entire turn in that process to just put minions on the board. He then has another turn to respond to your Nausea Cleric turn to rush more minions in and kill the Nausea Cleric and whatever minions you've used. How do you then stick a minion to end the game? It doesn't happen. Unless you're playing like a Shadow Madness variation of the deck where you can steal away one of your opponent's minions to do the job. You just don't win from that position.
I guess my feel in that position then is that Fino is then extremely confident in his read on Brawl, which he's right if that's the case. Pavel's still got all the left side of his hand still there. Your turn would be, if, let's say you drew Northshire Cleric, you get a ton of card draw on that turn, and then Pavel has initiative, and he gets to front load that and respond. Your board's lost. You High Priest Amet, you Psycho Pump, you get a board full of stuff, the Brawl's sitting there. That still at least forces Pavel to have a Brawl and then a way to kill the last minion remaining.
Okay.
Like, I think that concession is more of like a personal thing where it's like, don't get frustrated by sitting here and dying. Concede this game that you're going to lose 99% of the time.
Yeah, and I'm for clarity, I'm not saying 100% by any means. I think, but just from a mental perspective, I think you can say, I don't want to play this game anymore. Like, this game is dead. I'm just going to move on.
It's very Purple-esque. And I respect that. I think that being able to keep yourself in a good mindset is going to be a larger competitive edge if you're a player who's susceptible to that kind of thing than sitting there and trying to grind out 0.5% of an edge.
Yeah.
Definitely think that's the case. So I got word on game number 3. Both players, drastic transition from last game. Both players now moving on to their Holy Wrath Paladin deck saddle. And this mirror match gets crazy.
It does get very, very silly. It's a race for card draw in a lot of situations. But it is also, in a way, like you are trying to be a little bit protective of your own health total. You do have a lot of healing, and it's rare that an opposing Holy Wrath Paladin can build up enough pressure that your healing can't blast past it. But if the opposing Holy Wrath Paladin is capable of putting you in a position where you're below 25, you can then get in trouble because they can then get like an entire turn ahead at the end of the game by only having to fire off one Holy Wrath. And of course, the other thing that comes into play is just kind of the timeout chain in the way that Freeze Mage mirrors used to be decided by like ice block timing and who could end the game with the last ice block available. Timeout, very, very similar in this effect. And I guess finally, since we are staring it right in the face, Crystology starters will increase the win rate of the player that has them enormously as well.
Yeah, whether it costs 1 or whether it costs 2, that doesn't matter in this matchup. What really matters is just drawing that card in general. It's a powerful card.
Yeah.
Now, the increase of that card's efficiency from, in the balance patch, which took it from 2 mana to 1 mana, that's what made this deck, in my head, super competitive, was the ability to get these off early and then be able to chain minions together. If Pavel wanted to, he could have played Novice Engineer in that turn, should there be no second Crystology. But I want to take this time to talk about the deck list because a Soup Vendor has been drawn for Pavel, and that's not in Fino's deck. So for Pavel, he's actually running 0 new cards in his Holy Wrath Paladin list. He's got 2 Consecrations, he's got 2 copies of True Silver Champion, 2 copies of Holy Wrath. Soup Vendor is his main auxiliary choice for card draw. On Fino's side, he's chosen to run his Subdue, he's choosing to run Zephyrus the Great, as you can see in hand, and he's running High Priest the Call. So High Priest the Call, to me, is the one card in this match that is a major kicker in addition to Zephyrus.
Yes.
Is how does that change as the game goes on? Because Zephyrus says if you have no duplicates remaining, or no duplicates in your deck, that counts remaining, not what you started with.
Yes. It's kind of the auxiliary effect that we're seeing from Zephyrus, where you don't just have to play it in Highlander decks. Decks that get down to the bottom of their card pool can afford to play it as well. We're seeing it in Holy Wrath Paladin, we're seeing it in Myra's decks in Rogue as well, where it can just be a very, very big kicker. But that's the call that you mentioned. That is potentially the boy for Fino, because if he can protect his health total, get a huge stack of armor, and then start healing up again afterwards, Holy Wrath Paladin is a deck you can force out of the game just by amassing a health total that they can't deal with. That is a realistic possibility against this deck.
Yeah, and so for Pavel here, taking the board early, this is a matchup that's really weird where the 1/1 battle is concerned, because the chip damage is super relevant. Your opponent needs to be at 25 for Holy Wrath to be that single blow. And so, as the game moves on, that chip damage can be overridden. It's very easy to heal outside of range of that and keep going. But the problem here is that Fino's not checking it at all, and his check to it is going to be weak, I think, the turn that he does it. You're looking at Wild Pyromancer and then a spell to back that up. And so one of the things to think about is just how that pans out as you move through this game. At some point, he's going to have to expend a Wild Pyromancer. Like, a turn is going to be reserved for that. He's been missing card draw, You know, so if he picks up Prismatic Lens next turn, do you use it right away? Do you save it for the Wild Pyromancer turn? Like, this Hammer of Wrath in Pavel's hand is 4 damage right now. The True Silver's 8 more over a couple turns. Like, Fino's going to be at 15 pretty soon.
Yeah, I said that it's kind of rare that one Paladin can really, like, pile on pressure on the other one, but it's the quality of Fino's opening few cards has just been so poor that he's just ended up in this situation. Like, no Crystologies himself. That's meant that he hasn't had these 2-drop card draws that Pavel has, the Novice Engineers, the Blood Mage Thanos, that he could be just playing out himself to contest the board evenly. Fino's just a long way behind right now.
There's so much to juggle in this matchup, and they're all minor things, and that's what makes this matchup super complicated to me. So there's 2 things I want to look at also in this spot. Number 1, I think Fino has more liberty to use a Holy Wrath than Pavel does. The reason being would be strictly the High Priest the Call that's in Fino's list.
Yep.
Pavel does need to pay heed to that. Fino does not necessarily need to pay that heed onto Pavel's side. The second one is just going to be the additional damage from Pavel's deck, where Fino is running 1 Hammer of Wrath and 1 True Silver Champion. Pavel has 2 of each of those cards.
Yep.
So the reach that Pavel has is greater than Fino's is. I think that the kicker cards that Fino has, and being a check mark for Pavel that he has to make sure he's accounted for, is greater on Pavel's side. So a pretty interesting dynamic too.
Which path to choose?
Soup Vendor as well. That's something else to think about for Fino as a check mark. Like, do you want to damage your opponent early and open up that card for play?
It is a good question. I think when Pavel is... Yeah, like, Pavel has True Silver Champion that he can try to damage himself with, but it's not that easy considering that the opponent doesn't really play too many big minions for you to attack in. Of course, you do only have to be damaged for 1 to get 1 Soup Vendor proc off, but if you're trying to get multiples, it's very hard for Pavel to deal enough damage to himself to make that a real possibility.
Yep, got to be able to restore 3 health to activate Soup Vendor.
Yep.
And Shrink Rate here would be a hand size consideration, as well as you know, the move towards Shirvala being discounted. That's not going to be an issue for Pavel this game. He's got plenty of spells in the deck to make sure that's discounted. That is strictly a hand size play. You have to account for hand size in this matchup.
Yeah, it's the ultimate Paladin first world problem. Pavel drew both Crystologies, so he's now drawn so many cards that he's having a few hand size complaints, and that's something that does come into play with Holy Wrath Paladin. It's, again, as you mentioned, just another one of those multiple facets that you do have to juggle playing this deck. Fino whiffs again off the draw. His hand is just so stalled out right now.
Card draw remaining for Fino: 2 Crystologies, a Flash of Light, 2 Novice Engineers, an Acolyte of Pain, 2 Prismatic Lens.
He just rips the Holy Wrath. Feels like he has to. His hand is just stalling out, as we said. Ray again comes off the top, still whiffing on card draw.
7 out of 18 draws for Fino provide additional cards.
As Admirable said, he does have a little bit more of the luxury to be able to do that, but I mean, it's questionable even if that ends up being true, because Pavel has so much extra auxiliary damage, as you mentioned, with the True Silvers and the Hammer of Wraths. Fino doesn't really have that available to him, so the ability to push Pavel down below 25 now could be a very real problem for him.
The moral of the story is always take your extra card draw from Soup Vendor as soon as you can get it.
There's a Novice Engineer.
Something. Second banker picked up, though. So Fino, so now he's got to figure out how he's actually going to live in the face of what Pavel's throwing at him. And that's becoming quickly a very difficult problem. Like, he needs to chain together card draw, and frankly, that's just not something that he sets up at this point. Like, you fight for board to stop the chip damage, you hope you can heal out of range. You know, I'm trying to think of what Zephyrus cards can make a difference in this matchup. And that's just a hard thing to think about. I really don't know. I honestly have not played this deck in a mirror match with Zephyrus. That's definitely one of the decks that I did not expect to show up as a mirror match this week. So I'm just not sure. And Pavel's hands becoming clunky now.
A little bit, yeah. Both Balefuls stacking up is a little bit awkward. Both timeouts, like, they're good to have for security, but right now they're just kind of taking up hand spaces, being a little bit awkward. But he does still have plenty of, like, smooth card draw that he can play out. The problem, as we were talking about before, is drawing cards while keeping space open in his hand to draw those cards into.
Yeah, I mean, he may have to burn a timeout here.
Never mind.
Burns a banker instead. I don't know about that one.
There we go. And now this is, yes, there's the Novice Engineer as well. Does end up swapping with the Consecration, which is a little bit miserable considering he had the 2 remaining this turn. But starting to run into some hand size issues of his own. But that's like the way card draw is supposed to work. Like, card draw kind of propagates and snowballs. That's the thing with having so many card draw cards left in your deck. That's why it's so frustrating, because if you'd have just found one of those card draws earlier, you'd be deeper in your deck and you would have found more of the card draws, and then more and more of the card draws after that. You can see that effect coming in fully for Fino there as he chains 3 card draw effects together.
The card draw begets card draw, which hopefully begets card draw.
Which hopefully begets firing a tiger at your opponent's face with 25 damage.
It takes card draw to make card draw. Pavel just maybe landing on a kill at some point. I mean, my gosh.
He's just counting to 30, just shipping damage to the face until Fino dies.
Strange burn deck.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 12 damage over the next 2 turns.
Like my invention.
Christology finally for Fino, but how many minions does he have left? I'm guessing from that look towards his own deck list.
Acolyte of Pain.
Off on one side, it's not as many as he would like.
Just Acolyte of Pain.
There we go.
Yikes. In order for Zephyrus to become active, Fino would need to find...
Doesn't have a timeout yet.
Timeout. Yep, that's the one.
Pain speak to me.
Deciding to just risk the overdraw. Don't think he has much of an option. It would take a force of at least 2 for Pavel to be able to cause a burn to take place.
Yep.
Not interested in that.
And there's also this dynamic that goes like, this is a dynamic that you can play with in terms of mind games in Hearthstone, where if players have respect for each other, like Pavel might look at the scenario and say, well, Fino wouldn't play an Acolyte there if he wasn't secure with what cards he already has in my hand. Therefore, burning cards by overdrawing the Acolyte is actually positive for Fino because he's now at the point of the game where he just wants to empty his deck and start Holy Rash of Valoring. So you can kind of play with that expectation between opponents and play Acolytes in like positions where that's not the case because you know your opponent will respect you.
Yeah, and very much Pavel, I think, should be respecting it in that regard. Fino's a very keen opponent. Don't risk putting him ahead by giving him cards removed from the deck.
Right.
Back-to-back timeouts for Fino.
There's the Zeph. Active, though, over to the left, third card from the left. You can see the yellow border now, meaning that Fino only has single cards remaining in his deck.
What does that buy you, though?
It's a great question. We're about to find out.
Well, I mean, I've done this before. It gives you Guardian of Kings and Tyrion.
Yeah. I mean, Tyrion is potentially 15 more damage. I'm not sure how helpful that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Swing face. I think it's quite helpful. You know, Fino now has seen a Shrink Ray. He's seen an Equality. That means there's 1 Equality left in Pavel's deck. You know, is this a weird game where you just tempo a Shirvala and say, you know what, this is a 7/5 with Divine Shield. Deal with it.
By the way, there's a Tiger in Pavel's deck right now, and he has 2 Holy Rats in his hand and 5 cards remaining, and his opponent's at 10.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw that one out there.
Yeah. Now that's probably one of them I can see getting ripped. Both of them, that would be
I'm just throwing out.
That'd be a bold call, Cotton.
I'm just throwing out. Everything I said was technically accurate.
Don't act like you weren't suggesting it.
I wasn't.
Look, it's what everybody wants to see. Except for Fino. Fino's the only person in the world who doesn't want to see that happen.
Act now.
Yep, I just checked in with the internet. Everybody wants to see it.
Nice. Wow, that was very effective polling you just did. One of those...
Oh my, he's 1 out of 3 to make it happen.
One of those singleton cards remaining in deck for Fino now is that High Priest Thekal, which really does nothing at this point, as Admirable is just losing his mind about this Shivala possibility, and I think Fino recognizing it's timeout time.
Yeah, he's just going to play a Shivala. I think this is an excellent tempo play right now.
Agreed.
If I've done my math correctly, Pavel's last 2 cards are Equality and Shivala the Tiger. And so what this does is this actually puts pressure back on Pavel now about using that first, about using that first Holy Wrath. If he had used that, he wouldn't have the second Holy Wrath available. However, he's facing down a Shivala the Tiger with a Crystal Smith Kangor on board. So now what's happened is he actually, I think, needs this next draw to be not Shivala because he used a Banker earlier on. So he needs to connect enough damage to put Fino down to a low enough life total that he has the ability to use that second Holy Wrath, and Fino won't be able to restore health, but Fino's immune this turn. So everything boils down to that Banker that he used early on, which I said I wasn't sure about. That could cost him dearly now.
Pretty clean answer from Pavel, at least this turn, though. He's playing a timeout of his own. He knows he can afford to do so because his opponent has initiated the timeout chain himself, so now he can always just stay in this position where he's playing the last timeout, so he uses the timeout to proc the shields and the equality to sweep away. Timeout also, a little nice auxiliary effect, just preventing that 5 damage coming in from the Ashbringer. 5 is a big number in this matchup in terms of damage that you'll be taking in a single turn.
So Pavel now will be set into a fatigue state. A little bit extra chip damage. No minion to be played for Pavel. You don't want to open up lifesteal. Fino fails to find card draw. That's game.
Yeah.
Reporting for duty.
It's not only game, that is series over to the side of Pavel. And the reversal of fortunes from what we were seeing last season as Pavel gives a little trademark schoolboy smirk.
Yeah, that's a Fino closing the client there. That is effectively a concession. He's not waiting to reconnect. Why would you take this away from us?
Fino's already off hanging out on the beach with his dog somewhere, just having a good time. He's done with that series. Don't you worry about it. But yeah, as I was saying, complete reversal of fortunes from Season 1. We built it up at the start, where if Pavel was going to live up to these words, where he wanted to show everyone that he was still one of the best players in the world in Season 2, then there was no better way to do that than by beating the player who perhaps showed that he is currently one of the best players in the world in Fino during Season 1. Having said that, still some question marks around Pavel's play in certain places during that series, but he's got the W, point at the scoreboard. You just move on from there and you tighten up.
Yeah, so something to think about in that match that I want to just touch on real quick is I think that both players demonstrated understanding of the macro play and how the timeout timing changes the dynamic of how you use your cards and when it's mattering in that situation. For Fino, he failed to find card draw early on, and that's what set him behind. And then ultimately, Pavel having the full understanding of the endgame timeouts is what secured him in a spot where he was able to pick that up. I do like, though, that Fino was able to demonstrate a heal out of range line that makes a lot of sense in that circumstance. And so I think both players demonstrated understanding, but you know what? When you pit your wits and will against luck, sometimes the cards decide the rest. And I think that when both players demonstrate that, that's just how it's got to be sometimes. And so Pavel sounds like he's ready for an interview. Pavel, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hey, congratulations on your win here in this week. This was a big one as you were the bottom seed from last season, taking on the champion of season number 1. That's got to feel like a good win, Pavel.
Yeah, it feels good.
So I want to get your overall thoughts on the changes to Grandmaster and what you think of them so far. What are your thoughts overall with everything that's taken place?
Well, personally, I think that for best of 3, Specialist is a better format than Conquest with Shield, because I think that in best of 3 Conquest, there's a lot of situations when it's really gonna depend on a queue order. So I just think Specialist is better, but let's see if my opinion is gonna change during the season.
So I wanted to ask you, we ran a little interview it's a little bit outdated now, but we ran an old interview with you from before Season 1 where you said that, you know, you wanted to show people that you are still potentially one of the best players in the world. Obviously, Season 1, you didn't quite back that up. Are you feeling better going into Season 2? Like, do you think old Pavel is back?
I don't know if old Pavel is back, but I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna do better in Season 2, and my goal is get do you need to get top 3 or top 4 to qualify to qualifier? Can you tell me?
Sorry, what was the
Do
question?
you need to get do you need to get top 4 or top 3?
Top 3.
To get an okay. Yeah, so my goal is to get top 3, not only just not get last place, but also get top 3 and potentially qualify to global finals. And yeah, with a 0-1 start, it feels pretty good.
So I want to talk to you a bit about the decks that you brought this week and sort of your preparation. With Saviors of Uldum being released, I'm guessing you had more decks on your mind. Talk to me about some of your favorite decks in this expansion and how you landed on the lineup that you did this week.
I asked Psych about lineup because I'm not at home, so I can't really prepare. I have stuff to do. I have places to be, places to see. So didn't have time to prepare, but thanks to Psycho for sending me lineup, and that's what basically I did for the preparation.
Well, what are you out doing right now? Is it something you can talk about?
No.
Fair enough.
Some busy stuff.
Pavel, mysterious as always. All right, Pavel, thank you very much for your time. Look forward to seeing the rest of your matches this week, and good luck in the future weeks as well.
Thank you.
He is a little troublemaker. I'm telling you, I don't know what he's up to right now. Oh, he's going to get it?
Pavel makes me laugh. I'm pretty sure, secretly, Pavel is actually an evil genius, like a supervillain, because last time we were talking to him, like, what did you do after Worlds? Like, you took a little bit of break. Look, you were a little bit dark on social media for a while. What were you doing? And he's like, oh, I was visiting an active volcano. Now he's got things that he's not allowed to talk about. I'm just putting 2 and 2 together and saying that he is setting up a secret base inside that active volcano that he has scouted out with an opening at the top that a rocket can shoot out of. Pavel's world domination plan confirmed. That's all I'm saying.
You remember that game Evil Genius?
No.
So you set up a base and you like hired henchmen and you set up traps as you became more notorious and the world's greatest spies would try to attack you.
Yes.
That's Pavel right now. Playing a little too much Evil Genius, perhaps. You know, just a casual game. It's about as old as he is.